Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack, Chief Lead Generation Officer at salesbread.com.
What are we going to talk about today? Jack, tell us.
Today, we have a new tactic that we're going to unpack here, and it is using podcasting as a lead generation tool. And I'm not talking about growing a giant podcast and hope your ideal prospect listens to it and contacts you. I'm talking about using it as a direct outbound sales tool where you invite your ideal buyers and you try and use that as a foot in the door in order for that to lead to a sale.
So clearly not like our own podcast, right? Because it's just like two old dudes knowing each other, good friends, speaking, and no sales.
This is right. Cutthroat podcasting to generate nothing but revenue. You don't care about traffic. You don't care about reviews, metrics, large followings. Yeah, you're just going straight for buyers. And here's the thing, Jeremy, it's working. I've spoken to too many people that are using this to land, let's say, 5, 6 to 7 figure B2B sales deals to, I don't know, keep ignoring it. I think you and I should have a good chat on how to organize this podcast, how to use cold email to book guests, what scripts to use, maybe stats that we've seen, and all the stuff in between.
Yeah, I think we got plenty of tips for the listeners, right. Having done the podcast for more than 2 years now. But before we go any further, I want to hear your one-liner, Jack.
Thank you, Jeremy. Where would we be without the one-liner? Today, many plus most. B2B companies lack the time and expertise to turn cold prospects into qualified sales lead. At salesbread.com, we use ultra-personalized cold emails and LinkedIn messages to generate and bring you one lead or appointment every single day, Monday through Friday. If you want to find out more, go to salesbread.com/contact, get in touch, and write me a little message. We'll have a short chat, and I'll show you what's working. Thanks, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
Give us a scoop. Tell us about this amazing auto warmer you've got.
There you go. 5 seconds, 10 seconds max. We got a super auto warmer. So if you got deliverability problem, just hit quickmail.io and make yourself a favor and grab a free subscription for the auto warmer. And if you want to take it to the next level and do some, advanced or power user type of cold outreach, do not hesitate to try or to give QuickMail a spin. Is that okay? Shall we move on?
That was amazing. Okay, now we're ready. Okay, so podcasting as a lead generation tool. I'm going to start off with something every listener will want to know first, and that is, does it work? If so, how well does it work? So
it doesn't work. We just want to, chat for 30 minutes.
No, 10%. 10% of your podcast guests, if they are a good fit, have been converting. So where did I get this number? From a colleague, let's call it, who does this. He may even become a guest on the show at some point because he's a cool guy and he runs this as a service. He's saying clients that do this are converting at about 10%. 10%. So 1 out of 10 podcast guests end up buying or becoming a sales qualified lead, which is pretty cool, right? And Jeremy, you have to share with the audience what you told me when I first ran you that number. I thought it was like so
I don't know. I just did some math. It's like there's 5 days a week. I could just do, just 2 interviews every day and get a sales at the end of the week. And for me, it's cool. You got 50 clients the first year and then, it compounds. So, all right. But that would be all I would be doing if it was like converting at this. And in fact, we have many clients on QuickMail that do that as part of their sort of like normal work. I have one in recruitment that I remember very well. It's just like invite potential clients. The client is the one who need more candidates. And so because they build that relationship, it's like, hey, I like the guy, it's pretty cool speaking with him. There's like the barrier are like lowering, the trust being established. And then it's like, if I need people in this particular industry, then I'm gonna call my, good friend, or not necessarily good friend
Sure.
after a podcast, but someone I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you've heard it before. It's not what you know, but who you know. And look, I mean,
And
after
there's
doing
reciprocity,
outbound, yeah,
right? To
exactly.
some extent, like I make you a favor, I'll let you, come some exposure on my show. So if you want to bring it back.
Correct. Yeah, there's a big part of that, and I'll highlight both. Getting your foot in the door with an account is huge. That's the number one hardest part of outbound sales is first landing that meeting, because everyone doing outbound sales knows that their product or service is so good that if they could only line up the call, they're going to close 20 to 40% of them, and life's going to be grand. So, hey, if podcasting helps you get the foot in the door, that's great. And like you said, Jeremy, reciprocity is a force to be reckoned with. It really does work.
Question for you, Jack. If podcast converts at 10%, but good demo calls convert at 20, why doesn't podcast convert at 30%?
I
Because
think it is,
you should be inviting only the people who have the problem, the people who will be up for going into a demo with
well,
you.
fair, but you don't always know what problems people are dealing with when they agree to a podcast. So think about this, Jeremy. If I agree to a demo, it's because this thing that I'm about to watch in action solves something I'm going through. Now, if I agree to a podcast, it could be as simple as I like talking about myself, and this is a feather in my cap. No, I just look, I'm flattered when people invite me to their podcast. It's at the very least easy to talk about ourselves. So here's the, I don't know, the rub. Not everyone who ends up coming on your show that you have a conversation with will tell you they have a significant problem in that area. That's the challenge. So one of my tips that I wrote down before we press record here is do your due diligence and be very careful with who comes on your show.
Yeah.
If you just accept everyone, you may be polishing your podcasting interview skills, but you'll probably be missing that 10% mark substantially if you're just not carefully qualifying,
It does make sense. And I'm thinking, should you actually go, like for cold outreach, I'm always thinking like go with a small fish first, the one where you can afford, to screw up. I guess
Interesting.
for the podcast, that could be kind of the same. You go for the small one before you actually just try to land, I don't know, the CEO of IBM.
Hey,
Or some big stuff,
that's a good
right?
idea. And the nice thing with this particular tactic is the more guests that you have on your show, the more credible your show gets, the more of audience base your show has. So yeah, it's a stepping stone. I like that. So
in fact, sorry to interrupt you. Actually, it's like it's my
good.
night. I'm sorry. I'm probably
Good.
like super energetic because I'm drinking.
Hey, that's great. I think I'm dehydrated from playing tennis in 90-degree weather. So rock and roll, man.
There you go. In fact, that's how we got John Carlton on our show, right? It's just because we had like
Yes.
James Schramko in our show first, and he said, well, if you got James, yeah, of course I'm coming to your show, and doesn't really, ask for anything
Yeah.
else.
And then the next to that would be Perry Marshall, because James and John were on the same speaking tour. So we're not taking that next step. If you're listening and you know Perry, tell him we said what's up, and we've got John and James Schramko to back us up. Anyways, before we go any further, I know that let's say you're in your car and you're nodding your head, hey, 10%, sales qualified lead rate would make sense. This is cool. But how would you set up the show in the first place? I had a consult. Somebody said, I'm interested in this tactic, but what would the topic of my show even be? How broad or narrow do I set this?
Oh, that's super simple. What's your product solving? And then you just, zero in on this. If, for example, this is productivity for product managers, then that's your show. The best
What
productivity
an
for manager
answer.
show.
Oh my God.
Like, what are we doing here? We're doing code outreach. It's like, of
You're a
course.
genius. Hold on. I don't think everybody
genius.
listening. No, this is genius. This is nothing but genius, because you've just answered, how do you bring people in with the pain point? You can think about this. We have an outbound, cold email show. If anybody that agrees to do the podcast believes in cold email, has done cold email, or wants to do cold email at some time in the future, if you are a hardcore inbound marketer or an SEO that's never touched cold email, although not to bash my SEOs out there, but all of you guys are using cold email to get clients. But anyways, then that automatically disqualifies you. So I think that's an unquestionably brilliant response there. So let's take this podcast, or maybe we can just get granular here. So how would you, maybe with quick mail, or give us some more firepower? How do we pick the scope of the podcast?
Well, okay. So for quick mail, I will basically just invite lead generation companies, because that's their day in, day out. That's what they have to do, doing cold outreach.
To talk about what?
Well, to talk basically about outreach. And, it doesn't have to be necessarily with email. Of course, I will do my due diligence. So I will only invite, lead generation agencies that do outbound and not just inbound. And I will be talking about, tell me about your workflow, how your company is working, and, stuff around the company organization, because quick mail solves a workflow issue. Right. And so
smart.
Just say like, hey, tell me how you created your company. How did you grow? What were some of the problems you had? And at the same time, I'll gain like a lot of insights as to, what are some of the problems, and potentially expand my software to actually solve other problems that I identified.
Yep.
So I will also consider that like research, I think.
Okay.
What about you, Jack?
Yeah. So just for fun, I want to bring one more business in here. Let's pick something totally different. Let's say, Jeremy, that we're a design shop and we do logos and consumer packaged goods. Like, we'll design your things as it ships to consumers. Can you think of, let's say you're like, Jeremy, I want to meet more brand managers at let's say organic food companies, because those are our best clients. Can you imagine a podcast that might fit them? Can you give us any insight there?
So what problem are you solving? Like bad positioning? Like what
no,
really
we're making sure that these products are designed in a way that is going to resonate with the end buyer, and at the end of the day, sell more units.
But through what? Through branding? Because your branding is bad, or what's the problem?
Yeah, great question. So let's say the problem is half or more of the products that you'll find in a grocery store, for example, or Whole Foods, end up losing out on 20% of sales because there's not enough, let's say, intelligent, like psychologically minded design that goes into making consumers want to purchase. For example, if I know personally, if a box looks like it's from Kellogg's, I'm less likely to think it's going to be expensive, as opposed to if it looks like almost handmade, you're going to say, oh, that's a smaller batch product. That's going to be nicer. It's probably healthier too. So it could be as simple as bad design leads to bad sales, right? And that's what you're helping.
Okay,
then like a website. Like some websites don't sell well because they look like they were designed by.
But then in this case, this is CRO, right? And so the next thing.
This is what?
CRO, content rate optimization. I think it is.
Right.
Conversion rate. One of those things. Basically, to have better conversion.
That's right. Sure.
Or copywriting, for websites. So the next thing will be like, who is, and I think your questioning is fantastic. The next thing will be, who is actually my buyer, right?
Brand managers, right?
Exactly, but you wouldn't necessarily invite, for example, the CEO or or the cash register.
Right.
You need to invite the right person that will resonate with your solution and be interested and be the one who will actually buy it. So so brand managers. Then I would probably say the day life of a brand manager, or those sort of thing, and then here we go.
Well,
then everyone should also listen to that, because they're also brand manager. And they like that. And I don't know. That's sort of approach. What do you have? In mind?
So I could say it's like, hey, welcome to the supermarket growth chat, where we interview brand managers that talk about ways they're getting their products to fly off the shelf. We're joined today with so
we should do that. Let's change our podcast. This is boring outreach by email.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think we know how to tailor and programize our podcast.
Yeah, but okay, just a quick recap for the listeners. Then, go after the problem, right? And find what will resonate with your target audience. I think that's those two things, right? Because if you get those two right, then I think you're gonna get the right person in the cast and the right person to listen to the cast, because I think both are quite interesting, right?
Yeah, well said, and both are very important too. So let's see what's next is how do you book guests, and obviously we're going to talk about cold email here. I think this is the easy part, to be honest. Why? Because it's pretty darn easy to get even highly sought after people on a cast. So yeah, I would basically find a common denominator. So I gave myself like an easy bucket here. Let's say I built a list of founders that started multiple companies. I would cold email them and say, Jeremy, saw you've founded a few companies. Would you be up for joining me as a guest on the podcast on startup growth based on your expertise? Looked like it'd be a great guest or a great conversation. Question mark, end it right there. I mean, if you wanted to bolster it, that's where you would add some social triggers where you'd say, we just
been on our
had.
show already.
Exactly.
Exactly. We did have Dan Martel on it. He's a pretty big one as well. So it's, it's not that difficult to get big profile. But if you're intimidated by that, start with your clients. Your clients will rave about your software.
That's true.
Find your evangelists and let's say, and you will ask them some question, and then they will come and mention your software one way or another and say, oh, that's great. So help me solve this. And that's your first 10 episodes right there.
Pretty good. Okay, so stats for something like this. We sent out a very similar message for a client that was using this tactic to grow, and we basically found 15 to 20% replied, and of that, better than half ended up going on the show there. So you'll notice there's not a crazy amount of personalization. We didn't have to work that hard to get those replies. The hard work is going to come making sure that you do a good interview, you've selected the right candidate. So we need to talk about how to transition to this pitch, if you will, if you are really going to consider using podcasting as a lead generation tool. So a lot of people find it awkward to end a podcast session and say, so
do you want to buy my product?
Exactly. It sounds slimy, it feels slimy, and it just doesn't work. So how do you get that 10%-ish conversion without, breaking your own code of ethics? And I'll share how I would go about doing this. I would line up the podcast to the point where they've scheduled their interview on Calendly. We'd show up on the Zoom meeting at the allotted time, and in the beginning, straight from the beginning of the call, I say, okay, great. Thanks for joining. Here's how it works. In a few moments, I'm going to press record and we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. Okay. And if there's something you want to plug, feel free, say it in the beginning or the end, up to you. This is your time and your platform here. So tell us your story and point our listeners anywhere you'd like. And if there's anything you'd like me to ask in particular or avoid, now's a good time to cover that. Okay, great. And then here's where it comes. I'll say, and listen, at the end, when we're all done podcasting, don't hang up quite yet. I'll end recording, and I want to pick your brain on lead generation. I took a look at QuickMail. I've got tons of questions for you. So if you would stick around a little bit, a couple minutes, definitely want to pick your brain because it seems like you're on the same wavelength here. So are we ready to podcast? Yeah. So it's good. It's a little bit more on the up and up. And here's where most people are saying, but Jack, you just told him you're going to pick his brain. You're about to pitch him. That's not true. But no, I'm actually just going to pick your brain and share some insights, and I'll let you transition for me. So fast forward to the end of the call, Jeremy. We stop recording, say, hey, great episode. Okay, so let's talk lead generation. What are you guys doing right now at QuickMail? How are you guys growing? And I would start a couple of questions. I'm not going to bombard you, but maybe 3 or 4 to get an idea of how you're generating leads, how that's working. And if you've tried outbound, maybe cold emailing before, we'll explore that. Oh, you tried it, but it didn't work. What did you try? Okay, cool. So maybe next time do something like this, and I'll just give away 2 or 3 ideas that you can literally just hang up the call and go do, and they'll work. And if you share some truly valuable nuggets with the listener, they're going to transition. They're going to say, hey, try this. Yeah, like it's almost as simple as being like, hey, I'm going to give you everything that I know that's working. It's basically like free consulting squeezed into 5 minutes. So those are like some really valuable 5 minutes. And you'll say, yeah, and if you do this, like everyone that we're doing this for is getting north of 20% response and whatever. You can literally hand this template that I'm about to email to your marketing manager. They'll be able to run with it. That's when it's like, wait a minute. So if you've struck a nerve, they're going to come back to you with questions. Okay, so how do you work again? Who does this for?
It does make total sense. Like I could well see, and don't think that you have to have a secret sauce, or like, I could just be like, hey, Jack, why don't you actually just, create an army of VA that will automatically do the personalization for whatever, blah, 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 blah. The guy will tell you like, well, that sounds awesome, but I don't really have time for that. Would you be able to do that for me? And how does that work if you do that for me? And that's exactly the type of conversation you want to have is, someone just doesn't want to actually do all the work. So if they want to sacrifice their time to put all of this in place, they're probably not a good client anyway. So
it's very true. And I don't know. I like how that feels ethical, and it's still, in my experience, works quite nicely to convert.
You could also do it as a free trial. It's like, sorry, if you have like a product, you could just say like, hey, why don't you try a product? I just give it like, for 3 weeks if they're interested in effectively trying this thing, right? Like that could be like, why don't you put a small video on your website to attract more clients? And then you could tell you like, oh, I don't like that. That sounds slimy or whatever. It's like, okay, maybe not. But if they say like, oh, that sounds cool, but it's difficult, then you get the objection, and it's just objection handling. And they may say like, oh yeah, well, why don't we give it a try? Hey, and off we go, on board people. It's a good way. I like it.
When would you not use this tactic? I'm putting you on the spot here, but I think this isn't for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. When this, I will use it. I will not use it when I think this is not a good fit based on the interview. It's like, it turns out like during the interview, either that guy is a dick and I don't want to work with him, or girl, both can be dicks. And, or I realize that this is not, a problem for them, or they're not really interested, or it doesn't really apply. So for example, for me, it's outbound. And if I invite a lead generation company that is purely inbound and, express that they don't want to try anything outbound, it's like, yeah, what's the point? It's like, hey, and it's fine. It's a fail at the research level. Speaking of which, so we may have the same question. Dude. We may have the same question, but speaking of which, how would you actually do your research to make sure you get the right people on the show?
So I would make sure that they have a budget, that they're in that they look like my paying clients already. The closer they look to my paying clients, the better, both in how the business is set up and the job title of the decision maker. But I may go a step further, depending if I need to add a filter here. Filter 1 being the podcast topic. So again, no hardcore inbounder is going to agree to an outbound only show, right? So you do want your topic to filter. But number 2, I may even have like a quick questionnaire so that the new guest can fill out. So it's like, okay, name, company, expertise, what questions should Jack ask you on the show? And then just a final one, like experience with cold emailing or outbound sales to date.
Love it. So in fact, you will treat it as a funnel, like the top of the funnel being the outreach, but the funnel carries on with that questionnaire as well. So you will reject some people at the questionnaire side. I love it.
Exactly. So, and you could just say like, look, I saw in the questionnaire, you said you have zero experience with outbound. Unfortunately, that's, pretty much the focus of the show. So I'm going to have to end it here. Or, I mean, depending how you want to do it, you could even have a question that's like plans to implement outbound in your company at some level, scale 1 to 10, put a 1. It's like,
and you could do research. What tool are you currently using? So
exactly.
How to position.
And why this works is just because the bottom of that funnel is quite valuable to a lot of people. It's this spotlight podcast interview here. So that's certainly why adding layers to this funnel works. Whereas like traditional cold email campaign, the last thing you'd want to do is add friction. Here, you kind of want to.
I'm wondering, what do you think of, so I love your sort of, you actually invite the right customer, the ideal customer for you. Then you tell them like, hey, at the end, I'd like to pick your brain on outreach. What do you think of doing the show? You say, I have to stop to do a sponsor, and then it's like, if you have problems with deliverability and whatever it is, and try quick mail. Do you think they will react?
Wow,
or they will see it coming?
It's interesting. This is literally the first instance I've ever seen of an advert for one audience member.
That's
only.
Right.
I mean, kind of, but yeah, it's like this episode is brought to you by, and
you could ask your customers. Yeah, exactly. You can have your potential prospect at the beginning. Okay, so how big is your team right now? Oh, okay, blah blah blah. So let me start with a with small sponsor. So this episode is brought to you by QuickMail. If you have like 5 to 6 customers, 5 to 6. That's pretty
5 to 6 customers. You've been in business for 3 to 4 years, and you've got high blood pressure, but love tennis. Let me tell you about a way to boost those.
That'd be funny.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, Jeremy. It really isn't.
I don't know if this is like a bit too much, but hey, worth trying. That's the first thing. And the second thing
I would try it.
Don't get it is like, you don't have to publish the episode. There's literally nothing that forces you to publish the episode. And in fact, Jack and I, even though we invited plenty of people, we rejected one episode. Like, I remember that, we didn't feel really right about this episode. And we say like, hey, we don't have to release it. And so we didn't.
That's very true. There's a lot of pros going on with this podcasting as a lead generation tool. And in short, I would recommend it if you are going after larger deals and looking for a genuine, easier way to get your foot in the door with accounts. You have to have a solid close rate to back this up. I wouldn't dabble in this if you weren't confident that you really do have a product or service people are paying for happily. But it certainly is a new way to break open the door if you've had a hard time with that in the past. Something to add to your cold email tool belt. Sorry.
Yeah. And another advantage I'm thinking of is obviously authority. And so if, for example, I invite, this lead designer that is like, very well known, other people will want to listen to this episode too. So, that's sort of also spread, and that makes it easier to invite other designers. And the other thing you can do at the end as a sort of like habits, not only just picking the brain of people, but say like, hey, who other great designer are you following? Or who you basically get that free referral, and that sometimes tap into some of the communities. And that's pretty much how you get the foot in the door.
So smart.
But I must say that this is usually a big investment. Like, we've been doing it for like 2 years, and it's only,
3. I think 3.
Wow. 200 episodes, 50. Oh yeah, we're coming to our second year.
Yeah.
But our third year. But basically, yes, it only start to snowball, right? It does take time, and I don't think that's a small, quick investment.
But here's the thing: what takes time is the audience growth.
That's right.
To make an advert and have one of your listeners reply to it. That does take time. But the handy thing about what we've outlined here is if you invite the right person, you could technically get your first lead on your first interview, right? that's sort of the beauty. But there is a short and long-term play to this, and it's up to you to figure out if the strategy or tactic, I should say, is worth adding to the tool belt.
What do you think of this strategy or this tactic? Actually, this is tactic, not a strategy, but you actually do a panel and you actually invite one of your customer who is happy and evangelist of your product and one of your potential prospects you want to land. And then you
You're
ask them
full
like,
of
what are you doing
gold
with,
today.
cold outreach
Wow.
by email? Oh, we're struggling. We end up in spam. Oh, really? We're using quick mail. Everything's fine here. You should try it, man.
Wow.
I don't know.
That's not even fair.
I'm not sure it will work.
So think about this,
fun.
Jeremy. So I actually know a brand that made a practice of hiring their best customers, so they would be their marketing team. So I can think of two. One was like a personal finance tool, and another was a product tool. And they would bring on product managers and people that just use the tool and raved about it. They'd offer them a job, and now they would have this story that's like, hey, I have been there. Let me show you how this turned it around for me. And they were like the best salespeople in the organization. So
yeah,
no, that
my friend
works.
Amar is doing that actually. He's hiring,
Look at that.
people
it's brilliant.
who were made owners. And
yeah.
And they're still actually in parallel, still run their business. So
unbelievable.
It's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I would say so. Well, a lot of good ideas here, a lot of practical ideas. Hopefully, if you like this episode, wait, there's more. Cold email outreach masterclass. Jeremy and I have co-authored a pretty darn good course, if you ask me, on all things cold email. It's kind of our, how do you call it, our database of cold email writing hacks and deliverability secrets that we haven't been able to take a true deep dive on. So you can get access to this massive trove of videos and content that is like part 2 and 3 of this podcast by going to course.quickmail.io, right?
That's right. Course.quickmail.io.
All right. You heard it here. Go start yourself a lead generating podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. Our lead generation agency using the podcast to lead. Anyway, my mind is exploding.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great cast.
Great cast. Thanks, Jack.